forecast had heavily advised against the trip, but it was agreed that if you all headed out early, you could beat the storm. And that was the idea anyway. But with all the time it had taken to pack and make sure you had everything you needed, you didn't quite get the head start you hoped for. Then you were caught in the holiday traffic, which groaned a comment. And to think, fleeing from the city during alien invasion wasn't this bad. You were sitting shotgun in the party wagon, the back stuffed to the brim with bags, gifts, and supplies. With as full as the back was, this meant you and your crush, Raph, were traveling alone. The trip was to follow the others in the Shellraiser and have a quiet Christmas in the O'Neill family house. You cranked the heater up, hugging yourself and shivering. Glancing over at Raph, you spoke through chattering teeth. I can only imagine how you're feeling. He is cold-blooded after all. Yeah, freezing my tail off, he grumbled. He wore a thick red scarf around his neck, covering his snout, and a large sweater that stretched to cover his shell. You rubbed your hands together and stuffed them in your pockets. How much longer do you think? You asked, worried about being stuck in the car at night. It was at a full moon, and you worried you greatly. You had yet to tell the others of your secret. Hopefully another hour or so. Nothing goes wrong. He grumbled, glaring at the frost-bitten road that stretched between the van and the modified subway car. Nodding, you sighed and tucked a blanket over yourself, watching the snow-covered trees as you passed through. Thought of the animals that you had been buried to white out the winter, and emerged when spring arrives. After some time, Raph cursed beneath his breath. It was barely audible over the rush of the heater and the patter of snow pelting the outside of the van. Pulling your gaze from the woods, you looked at him and raised a brow. What's the matter? You asked. We weren't able to beat the storm. He growled and flickered at the wipers. Facing forward, you looked at the windshield, barely able to see out of it and having lost sight of the Shellraiser. You could feel your stomach sink, and you gripped your belt. Where are the others? The Shellracer can handle any weather. They probably are at the farmhouse, he grumbled. So we can't be that far off, right? You asked, looking at him. Before he could answer, he grit his teeth and fought to keep control of the van after you hit a sheet of black ice. Serving, you both cried out before he managed to regain control and stop. Squeezing your eyes shut, you held a death grip on your seatbelt, panting. Raph at his head bellowed. We're stopping. Once the storm lets up, we'll continue on, he said, putting it in drive and carefully pulling off to the shoulder. What? We can't stop now, you argued, looking at him. We almost got into an accident, as I can hardly see out the windshield, he snapped. Shrinking back in your seat, you looked out the window. You heard the click as he cut the engine and threw the keys down the dashboard. You sat in your silence, listened to the storm, and watched as the road had become blanketed in snow. Huffing, you undid your seatbelt and rummaged to the back, pulling out a pillow, a small radio, and some snacks. You're going to be stuck in here. Might as well try to at least distract yourself. Clicking on the radio, you switched through the static-filled stations until you somehow got a clear signal of some holiday music. Raph glanced at you before settling back and folding his arms across his chest. Closing his eyes, he grumbled to himself. Rolling your eyes, you turn up the scratchy signal and munch on some mixed nuts. So much for Ian being the most wonderful time of the year. Here you are, all alone with your crush, and the perfect time to be snuggling together, to share warmth, and you're on edge because of your secret, and he was irritated because you freaked out about stopping. Sighing, you relaxed before muttering. Do you want to share the blanket? It's cold. We should keep warm. I'm cold-blooded. It'll just make it worse for you, he grumbled, keeping his eyes closed. You decided against arguing. Who knows how long you'd be stuck in there with him. Have it your way, then. A few hours passed. You must have fallen asleep, because the last thing you remember is cocooning in the thick blanket you brought. The storm was howling outside. The white noise of the radio had been reduced to pure static, and felt like icicles were starting to form inside the cabin of the van. Then your teeth were no longer chattering. Groaning, you hunched over, squeezing your eyes shut. Of course, this is what you had to wake up to. It felt as if your frame was boiling. Shoveling the blanket off and tugging yourself free from your jacket, you growled, clawing at your forearms as you hugged yourself. You could feel your claws starting to tear into your shirt. Panicking, you fumbled with the door, the force causing the van to rock lightly before you managed to throw it open. A flurry of snow rushed in, chasing out what little warmth remained in the van. Stumbling out in the snow, you dropped to all fours. Arching your back, you cried out, the ripping of fabric only caught by your sensitive ears. The cold shell shocked Raph wake up. His eyes shot open. He looked around at the open door. He could hear strange groaning or growling, but the flurry of white rushing and curtained whatever was making that noise. Grabbing a sigh, he leaned over to look, his hands spilling on your coat. A few tears and it caught his attention. His heart sped up. He flicked on the flashlight. A beam of light hid snow-speckled fur that stood on end. Wheeling around, the creature snarled. It was like, what, the shell? It looked like one of the werewolves they encountered when they were trying to save New York from being attacked by monsters with Renee. The beast roared and turned tail, booking it into the woods. Hoping, he looked around and knelt as he noticed the shreds of fabric in the snow. His heart sank as he looked over your ripped clothing. He slammed the door shut and took off after the werewolf, following the tracks left on the freshly fallen snow. Once you had gained some distance, you whined and began to pace through some trees. It was freezing, and you were starving. Your ear twitched as you heard something rush by. Turning your head, you lowered yourself, growling low as you dug your claws into the snow beneath you, the fur along your spine raising up with tension. Narrowing your glowing eyes on the small rabbit that was scurrying away from the safety of its burrow to put some distance between you. In an instant, you had pounced, the squeal of defeat muffled by the roaring storm. Raph was leaning against a tree, gritting his chattering teeth, clutching the flashlight, and his sigh. Damn it all. If you hadn't stopped... No. If it weren't for this stupid trip, you'd still be... safe. The bitter cold snipped at his nose and exposed legs. He was freezing, and you nor the beast were anywhere to be found. Pushing off the tree, he forced himself to continue on, but only for a few steps as he fell into the snow. Huffing as the cold burned his throat, he let out a hoarse yell. As his eyes were drifting shut, he could hear the soft pounding of something bounding through the snow. A large figure stood before him, snow obscuring whatever had found him. He made an attempt to push himself up, but fell unconscious. You nuzzled your crush, whimpering as tears streaked down your fur. Biting onto his sweater, you lifted him off the freezing ground. Turning, you head back for the van, carrying the red-banded turtle. Back at the van, you pulled him into the front seat, then yanked the thick blanket over him. Climbing inside, you carefully laid on top of him, shielding him from the cold. You huffed and whined, hoping he'd be okay. Laying your head down, you closed your eyes, waiting. It was silent now. The storm had passed, and it was the wee hours of the morning. Raph had woken up coughing. Either he was so cold that it was hot, or, slowly opening his eyes, he looked at the creature resting on him. Clouds of your hot breath blowing onto his face, making him crinkle his snout. He watched you in confusion. Didn't you eat? Your ear twitched as he choked out your name. Yawning, you blew a cloud of hot, stinky air in his face. He groaned and shifted beneath you. Gross. What the heck did you eat? Lifting your head quickly, you looked down at him, tilting your head curiously before sniffing him. Your tail started to wag violently. It audibly hit the door and window as it sped up. Licking his cheek and jaw happily, you nuzzled closer to him like a gigantic lapdog. So, this is why you don't come around on the full moon nights, huh? He asked, suddenly understanding. You let out a soft huff as a reply. Yeah, give me a damn fright. I thought something bad happened to you, he said, lifting a hand to weakly caress your cheek. Closing your eyes, you leaned into his touch, silently apologizing over and over again. I'm glad you're okay, he said before placing a kiss on your snout. Looking at him in slight shock for a moment, you licked his snout in return. The two of you cuddled like this until dawn before you shifted back, pulling up your pajamas and ripped jacket to avoid waiting for the others in your birthday suit. Cuddling up to Raph, you traced your fingertips along his cold skin. Merry Christmas, Raph. A smirk smeared across his lips. Yeah, it's Christmas, huh? Merry Christmas.